Okay, well today is the 16th of March 2021. Now I have covered the subject in the past, but there have been some developments, shall we say, that might change a lot, in other words, in the next few months. Now I'm talking about aliens. I'm talking about, well actually the point here is I've had an interesting discussion long distance with my brother in Western Victoria, and I said there are three streams of evidence that create proof of that issue, in other words, that aliens exist and so forth. Now people straight away would say, oh, start scoffing, oh, what are you talking about, proof? There's no proof. Well, there is. And the word proof actually just means overwhelming evidence for something. Now, if you only had one stream, in other words, that is to say the multiple millions of sightings of craft, and in some cases with beings on the ground, and also people being abducted and so forth, you'd say, oh, I'm not too sure about that, and oh, I've heard about those stories, and oh, you know, even stuff like Roswell, New Mexico, which is only just one of a number of cases. You might say, oh, I can't totally accept that. So, all right, and I'm hoping to get this finished in, a few minutes. Now that's one stream. The second stream is Sumerian history. Please look up these things and look up the Anunnaki, and in the Sumerian history, and the Anunnaki were, all it means is from stars to earth they came. Now you have to accept that's their history. They wrote it down. They were the first people in the world to have a written language. They had advanced mathematics, astronomy, medicine. They even found cases where skulls dating back thousands of years apparently it had laser surgery, perfect operations with laser cuts and so on. Can't understand how that's possible, but it has happened. Now one of their temples has a map, a carving of a map of the solar system, with the sun in the center, of course, and there are all the other planets in orbit around the sun. Now this was thousands of years before the invention of telescopes. That's pretty powerful, and there's more to it than just that, but that's been translated, and there have been lots of books on the subject and so on. Now that's the second stream. The third stream is something else that's a little bit controversial for some people, but it's scientifically proven beyond any doubt, and that's what they call remote viewing. Now you can look up, I've had books on the subject. I've bought even book on Amazon and so on, and read that, and I still got it here somewhere. What's involved here is absolute, the best scientific testing of the ability of these people who say they have remote viewing. In other words, like ESP, they can see things or go to their mind or whatever, they can go to places that they are not physically going to. Now this was all started, shall we say, the era really before the U-2 spy plane and the spy satellites were very much in use at all. There was a whole series of people were tested. Some were found not to be very satisfactory or much used. Others were extremely good. Now they had one gentleman who was given these tests, and he had one of the great, this is what I call double blind tests, where somebody wrote 4 addresses in the different envelopes, sealed the envelopes, unmarked at all, just sealed the envelopes, put them on a table in a separate room. 4 people were invited in to pick up 1 envelope each. All right, they're unmarked, take them, leave the building, and downstairs there would be a car with a driver, who will take them to the address shown in the envelope. Now it's very simple. They open up the envelope. Oh, well, we got to go to that address. Okay, drive to that address. Now, 3 out of the 4 arrived within a short time at that address. Not just one address, there's 4 different locations around San Francisco, and the 4th one had not arrived, and the person in the test had in a trance, let's say, a lot of this and not really knowledge of it. When the 4th one didn't arrive at that point, I said, well, I'm getting tired of this. Look, I can tell you now where it's going to be. I mean, it's as if he could understand or read the person's mind or whatever. He'd know, well, go over to that place. That's where it's going to be, and it's an old disused factory, and it's such and such. I gave you the address. Well, one of them was a harbour, a yacht. I see water, wharves, yachts, this and that, and so on. So properly described, and that was correct. Now, this person was given, he said, I'm getting a bit tired of this simple stuff. Give me something difficult. This was way back in about 1970s. They said, oh, well, look, they're going to launch a spacecraft up to Jupiter. And we want you to tell us what you see on Jupiter and all that, you know. Because they're going to go and take photos, and it's going to be a flyby, and they're going to, all that sort of thing. Oh, he must have gone into a trance or whatever and worked it. Okay, I can see all here. It says, you know. Above Jupiter is a ring. And someone in the room, there's a couple of people in this room while this is all going on. Don't you mean Saturn? No, I know the difference between Saturn and Jupiter. It's perfect. I'm telling you, there's a ring around this Jupiter. All right, a couple of years later, the spacecraft arrived and photographed the ice rings that were around the planet. They had not been seen before, so the guy can't make it up. There they are. But there was far, far more to it than that. There's a lot of books on the subject. And so that is, oh, that's right, I forgot. This is, you say, well, what's this got to do with aliens? Well, it's got a lot to do with it, because what would happen, during one of these tests, they would give him coordinates of, and they knew where the 4 places were. They knew that, you know, they had the exact location, what's there. So they said, oh, we'll go to so many degrees north and so many degrees east. And he goes, yeah, okay. Seems to me I'm over Russia. Seems to me I'm over a forest, and oh, there's a house, and I'm going to go down and have a look in the lounge, and I'm going to go look around the house, and he described the contents of the house and everything else, and they said, oh, okay, very good, yes. Tick. Turns out to be Khrushchev's home or holiday dasher, as they call it, a house in the country. Okay, another one was over in Newfoundland, you know, off Canada, you know, the ocean. And he could see a submarine and said, oh, I see a submarine. But it's not one of ours. And they said, uh-huh. You know, they suspected that Soviet submarines were patrolling the area. Spying, I suppose you could call it. So another one is, he said, well, look at this coordinate. So he goes over he's I'm over the mountains. It was bright red. It's like Arizona, I guess, you know, or New Mexico or whatever. Very bright red desert country. There's these white domes. Oh, he said, I can see below the earth. I can see tunnels, and there's aliens walking around in the tunnel. Of course, they're thinking, whoa, that's crazy, you know, but the location was Pine Gap, nearly went blank on it, in Central Australia. And of course, you can't get into Pine Gap. It's an American base, so much so that they drive on the right-hand side of the road instead of the left. It's got American cars and everything there. It's completely secret, and the domes he saw are for satellites, tracking and communications and all the rest of it. There's no proof that there's anything underneath it, and you can't get in there to find out if there's anything underneath it. Now, most of the people in the base have got no idea. Almost nobody would have any idea that anything like that would exist, but he claims that it did. So there's that, and you think, well, okay, that's interesting. You were right with everything else, and you're telling us about that one. That's curious. Well, there's that, but then there's also many other examples of people having seen and interacted with things like beings up close, shall we say. And one guy was doing weather balloons at a remote place, not Area 51, but in that general region, and he had to test the weather. This was way back. This was long before all the weather satellites and everything else were around. And he saw one day, he was alone in this, there's a barracks there that could take a number of people, Air Force personnel from time to time and so on. But he saw somebody who was just setting up a balloon, and he's about to set it off. At the corner of his eye, up on a hill, and there's this white person, very tall, maybe 7 foot or higher, maybe 8 foot tall. Totally astounding. And he thought, whoa. And it turns out that he had, gradually the people had come closer and closer, and it turns out that these beings had underground base there, and eventually they got to accept each other and sort of communicate and everything else. But he said what it turned out, a number of people who had done that weather reporting system had gone, one of them in particular had gone insane. I mean, he'd been discharged with mental illness. He couldn't tolerate the fact that these beings were walking around from time to time on that base, which should have had nobody else but himself on the base. And they'd come past the barracks, and they'd look in the window, and a guy, of course, as anyone would be totally terrified. So that just gives you an idea about that. It might sound wild and wacky, but there you go. But the last thing I have in mind is there was a report in a Donald Trump law that he signed, huge law, hundreds of pages, about, it was to do with COVID-19 relief, into the billions. In that, for some reason, anyway, in it is a requirement, must have been October or so of last year, to report within a certain number of months. I think this is something funny like 180 days. Like if that comes to maybe middle of this year, about May, June, they've got to report everything they know about the subject. That means what they know, everything about it. Now, it might end up being a fizzer, because it might be all redacted, so to speak. Black, 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 black. Maybe we won't learn much. We could learn everything there is that they know. And that means that they're well aware of alien races having bases, well aware of interacting with them, and about alien abductions and all of that. So I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself on that, but it's because it's some months away. But as I was saying to not just my brother Chris, but to other friends who I know who scoff at the subject right now, even family members, they would suddenly say, hey, wait on, you've been talking about this for a very, very long time. And this is earth-shattering news if it all comes out the way that it may be, if it's in that report. And it's going to be vastly bigger than what's happened with the US Navy admitting that these craft, and that's what they are here. Pilots have filmed them, and you had that recording of the pilots astounded, they're acting when they see these objects, and what I've seen on radar, and they call it tic-tac UFOs because they're big white craft, and actually what they are is about the size of a 737. And one of them was 20,000 feet in altitude and dropped to 50 feet above the water in less than 1 second. And they flew over one of the craft, and it was just below the surface of the water. They could see it. flying over the top of it. There's the craft, no wings, no propulsion system that they could see. Smooth, white, gigantic craft under the water. Now the Navy said, this is genuine film, these are genuine UFOs, we do not know what they are, but they released that. It happened way back in 2004 or 2005, there was various incidents that happened. Now some people, as I say, including family and friends, don't take any notice of all that. Oh well, is that right? Yeah, I don't care. But if this report comes out the way they say it may, it might change an awful lot. So I don't mind civil and polite comments and discussion on this, but thanks for viewing anyway.